Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing the Assassin's Creed franchise on the GeForce GT 1030. For performance monitoring, I'll be using CAM, except in Assassin's Creed 1. If you want to download this software, there's a link down in the description. So the Assassin's Creed franchise, I'll be doing all the Assassin's Creed games, except in a couple things. Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry, that's a standalone expansion for Assassin's Creed 4. So it runs pretty much the same. And Assassin's Creed Chronicles, I don't own it, so I didn't test it either, but it's a side-scrolling game, so it shouldn't be very demanding at all. And I wanted this video to be 30 minutes maximum, and that's what this is, a 30-minute long video. If you want to skip to any specific game in the series, just check the timestamps down in the description. So yeah, we start with Assassin's Creed 1. I'll be doing 1440p with maximum settings. And well, this game is from 2008. So it runs totally fine. We're pretty much over 60 frames per second all the time. There might be a drop or two to 58 FPS, but nothing major. The game plays just fine. It has very poor draw distances, especially on shadows, but this game is around 10 years old, so I'm not really surprised about it. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you again in the next game.
You'll find everything here, my friend. Where is the war consumed the land, and thousands of lives are lost in its defense. It seems a tragedy, but I say, this is an honor. To die in service to God, fighting for what we believe in. There is no greater glory than this. You will die. Shaitan is everywhere, watching, waiting. He tempts us all. Die! I'll take you down! Keep away from me! Someone may leave horrors in their wake. Al-Hadid arrived immediately that he's barbarous. He's a murderer! He may grant us victory! He just murdered someone!
Assassin's Creed 2, and once again I'll be doing 1440p with the maximum settings. And you notice that VSync is disabled, but the game is capped at 60 frames per second. I recommend using an external solution for VSync, for example the adaptive VSync option in the media control panel. That one doesn't cap your frame rate at 30 frames per second when you drop below 50, so don't use the in-game option for VSync, it's not a good solution. But yeah, so far we're between 50 and 60 frames per second most of the time. There are some drops here and there every now and then, but nothing major if you ask me. Very poor draw distances, you can notice that on characters and shadows. That was fixed on the PS4 and Xbox One version of this game, which is the Ezio collection, but unfortunately on PC we didn't get any of those updates or any improved version of this game, so this is the only option for us right now.
Come, friend! I see the statue! I'll send you to your grave!
Trouble. Suddenly a man. Better have a look.
Bella Madonna! I want no part of this! You won't run away this time! Help! He's a murderer! Call the wash! Another one. These are evil times. Let's not stay here. Down! Eccolo! Continua! There he is!
Now I'm testing Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and I'm going to be doing on this one 1080p. I had to drop the resolution because if not it dropped below 60 frames per second pretty much all the time. I was around 40 frames per second instead, and since we have some room to spare I just use multi-sample anti-aliasing on 2 times, which is MSAA, in order to get less jagged edges, and the rest on the maximum settings, and the game runs at 60 frames per second pretty much all the time like on the previous games. This one is a little more demanding than Assassin's Creed 2, but overall this game is way better looking if you ask me. So yeah, I talk to you again in the next game.
Be ready to fight.
What are you doing?
Saving you from the look of things.
Not bad for an old man.
Agreed. You still have some skill.
Buona questa.
Excellent. Good one. Impressive.
He's crazy. Have you no shame? What the devil is he doing?
I see him!
Now I'm testing Assassin's Creed Revelations, and on this one I did 1080p as well, like on Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, but this time around I used 4 times MSAA instead of 2 times. For some reason on this game 4 times MSAA didn't seem as demanding as on the previous game. And well, this one, apart from being a newer game, when you're looking very far into the distance, for example you're at the top of a very tall building or something like that, and you look into a place where there's a lot of detail, that will make the frame rate drop below 60, but that's not because of the GPU not being able to or something like that, that's because the game is not properly optimized for more than 2 threads, apparently. It doesn't take full advantage, as I said, of the CPU. You'll see that because the GPU usage will drop below 90%. It's not like it drops to 40 or something like that, it drops between 50 and 60 frames per second, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, this one runs just fine as well, and it looks pretty good, and I'm going to talk to you again in the next game.
Assassin! You killer! Got to get out now! Danny there! Run! Got to get back home! God save us! You are evidently a lost senile. You find... Get there! Stop him! Where is he? Damn it!
Now I'm testing Assassin's Creed 3. And this one, unfortunately, I had the bug where the resolution option doesn't show up in the options menu, so I had to edit a config file in order to get my desired resolution, and I had to lower the anti-aliasing quality to the minimum, and I had to lower the shadow quality one step down from the highest in order to get constant 60 frames per second, and this one just seems to take full advantage of single-threaded performance. You'll notice that because on the internet, a lot of people are unable to hit 60 frames per second on this game, especially people that have CPUs with a lot of cores, for example, the FX 8350. Those usually are not that stable when you're just playing this game because it seems to just take advantage of 2 or 3 threads. So yeah, be aware of that with this game if you have an FX processor or something like that, and it won't hit 60 frames per second constantly, but overall it's a very playable experience.
Take care!
Assassin's Creed 4, and on this one I'll be doing again in 1080p, and this one wasn't properly optimized to begin with. Do not enable physics or VSync on this game, those are very demanding options. VSync actually just caps the game at 30 frames per second if you drop below 50 frames per second, which is ridiculous. It's double buffered VSync. If you want to use VSync here, just use adaptive VSync from the media control panel or something like that. But yeah, I took the settings in order to get 30 frames per second because getting 60 frames per second constant on this game requires a more powerful GPU. You might be able to get close to 60 if you drop to 720p and disable ambient occlusion. But yeah, on this video I'm just targeting 30 frames per second. On places with a lot of foliage you might get drops to 27, 26, but in my opinion it's not a deal breaker here. I was playing with a controller so I didn't have much of a problem, but just be aware of that. You can lower a couple extra things if you want a more consistent frame rate. But yeah, overall it's a very playable experience.
Git. Where's he running to?
Follow and I'll kill you!
We could work together on this! Keep your distance!
Imbecile!
Assassin's Creed Liberation HD, and on this one I'll be doing 1080p with the maximum settings except in anti-aliasing. For some reason anti-aliasing in this game is very demanding. If I put it on high instead of turning it off, I get like half the frame rate, which is ridiculous if you ask me. This game originally was released on the PS Vita, so it was a portable game, but we got an HD edition which allows us to, well, just tweak the game how we want, use higher resolutions, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it runs at 60 frames per second just fine. The frame rate is locked at 60, so if you want to use VSync, again, use the adaptive VSync from NVIDIA control panel. I'm going to talk to you again in the next game.
You will pay for that! Stop! Aye! There she is!
Assassin's Creed Rogue. On this one I'll be doing 1080p with pretty much high settings and reflections on normal, and I turn off God Rays volumetric fog and lower the ambient occlusion option from HBAO Plus to SSAO in order to get a more consistent frame rate. And well, by using those settings I was able to maintain 60 frames per second most of the time. This game was made when Assassin's Creed Unity was releasing on PS4 and Xbox One. Since that game wasn't releasing on PS3 or Xbox 360, they made Assassin's Creed Rogue for those platforms. So this game was made for the last gen consoles, which is very similar to Assassin's Creed 4. You have naval battles, fortresses, all that kind of stuff, but it's winter and you're playing as a different character. It's a very fun game actually. I recommend you try it out if you liked Assassin's Creed 4. But yeah, this one runs much better than Assassin's Creed 4.
Pour l'amour de Dieu.
Attention, grenade! Je suis prêt à faire mal. On ne te laissera pas filer. Et s'il se cachait?
Assassin's Creed Unity, and it was a mess when it was just released. A lot of patches improved this game's performance. Of course, it's still not perfect, but it's a lot better than when it was first released. I can say that because I tested this game on day one and it was a mess. And for this one we're doing 900p on pretty much medium settings and ambient occlusion turned off, and that was enough to be between 26 and 32 frames per second pretty much. You'll notice when I first attack an enemy or something like that the game is loading something because it just stutters very quickly. The same happens when I get from the haystack into the floor. The game just loads all that part of the map very quickly, so the first time you launch the game you will see that like for 2 minutes, and after that the game will be way smoother. So yeah, this is my highest quality configuration for this game on this GPU, but I recommend for this one that you overclock the GT 1030. You can get a couple extra frames and the game will feel more stable, or just drop to 720p and the game won't drop below 30 frames per second when it's not loading new assets. But yeah, overall a very playable experience, but I recommend you use a controller for this one. Mouse control at this frame rate is very uncomfortable.
Il s'agit... Ma parole, j'aurais pu.
Got ya! You're no better than the ghost!
Assassin's Creed Syndicate. This one will be again on 900p, environment quality on high, textures on medium, shadows on high, SSAO as ambient occlusion, and anti-aliasing on FXAA. And you'll see at the very start of this game's footage that I'm just looking far into the distance on a very tall building. That's because the game struggles to maintain 30 frames per second when doing that, which in my opinion is not a deal breaker. It's still running just fine. When you get down from the building and you're just running around, going in a carriage or anything like that, the game just stays at 30 frames per second. Just keep in mind when you're just looking far into the distance on a very tall building, you'll see drops below 30 frames per second. You'll see many of those around this footage, so be aware of that. If you want to fix it, just drop to 720p or lower the environment quality a little bit. The environment quality actually doesn't do much to fix this, but it should make the game more stable overall.
Hey, sir, I beg of you just a moment. You think it's a crime? No. I mean, stop fighting from that geezer. No wonder I swear. Wait, chef, this isn't the normal.
Here now.
And finally we're doing Assassin's Creed Origins, and this one is the latest Assassin's Creed made so far, at least at the time of making this video. So just check the date down in the description. Well, in order to make this one reach 30 frames per second, I had to use 900p once again, on pretty much a mix between medium and low. I had to keep textures on the minimum, because if not, the card just makes the game stutter. It doesn't seem to have enough memory bandwidth to just handle low textures, so I had to go even lower, unfortunately. So the textures look very muddy, very low resolution, which is kinda undesirable if you ask me. But with this GPU, unfortunately we don't have much of an option on this game. So if you want to improve the texture quality, maybe consider dropping to 720p, but be aware that the game might stutter a lot if you go over very low textures. So just try to experiment with that and see what works best for you. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Oh, Diamelias, who got a lovely Ignoskis?
Move! Hurry! No space, keep tight. I must get clear. Stop any pursuit.
Αδύνατο, αρνούμε. Άφρονε άραγε είστε.
Will not escape you now.
Μισό τους καραβιούστε και την αταξή.
Εσού ελάβνην ου γιγνωσκό.